So if you've ever worked with data in a table, maybe you've had this frustration where you go to put stuff to the side here and you want to go to filter the table. And let's say I wanted to see all the sales data of October, and I go to filter it and it completely destroys everything that's over here. So what I'm going to talk about is how to create something where we can have filters up top here, and we can change this stuff to see what we want to see without it destroying anything that we have over here. All right, so I've typed up some instructions. Hopefully this will plug in any holes that are in the walkthrough that I do. This talks about the issue, and these are the steps that I've written out. And you can pause the video and get these instructions right now. Okay, so let's go ahead and walk through. I anticipate it's taking about 30 to 45 minutes, so I'm going to try to be brief. So if there's anything that's confusing, hopefully the document will clear it up. Right off the bat, a couple things we're going to need. First, we're going to need a Microsoft operating system. We're going to be using Power Query, so we're going to need to have that. Apple doesn't have that possibility as of yet. We're also going to need VBA. So if you don't have VBA, you can have to turn the developer tab on. There's some videos out there that talk about how to do that. So I've got two tabs down here, filter tab and a data tab. And these are right here are just ones that I've already completed, so it's going to be ignored. But we're going to have two there, and you can see this is the original one that I have my data on. So we're not going to be using this sheet, so I'm going to copy the data, and I'm going to copy it over to the data table, and I've already done that there. And I'm also going to copy this little table here, so we're going to be using that a little later on, over to that one right there. So that's step one. Step two, we're going to be creating the filters. So we're not going to be using these drop-down ones here. Like I say, that's going to cause the issue that we talked about. So we're going to be creating our own filters. And I'm going to show two ways. The first one is going to be if you enter into a cell. So a great example of this would be dates, a date range. And a second is going to be if we wanted a drop down. So come here to developer tab, insert combo box here. And this particular one, we're going to want it to span 2 rows of data. So I'm going to cover 2 rows there. You'll see why a little later on. And so this is going to be our division. So we have a division color-coded here, and we want something to where we come up here and click the drop-down and choose color, and it'll filter that out. So so that's step two. Step three, we're going to set up the combo box before we get into Power Query. So we're going to right-click on this, Format Control. So what these are, the input range is going to be what's in the drop-down. The cell length, this is going to return a value of 1 through however many drop-down options you have. So in this case, we're going to have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We're going to have 6, and we're also going to have an all-encompassing drop-down, one that says all colors, because there's no way, at least that I know of, to reset the combo box. So we're going to want to be able to click on all colors when we want it to reset back to the data without filtering it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come. Let's see. I'm doing this on the data tab, so that's wrong. So I'm going to cut this. I'm going to paste it over here to the filter tab. All right. I'm going to copy this over into this right here. So what I'm going to do on the drop-down is, instead of using this, I'm going to come over to the data tab, which we're not going to use. I'm going to put all colors right here. And then in the format control, I'm going to choose all of these right here. Cell length, we're going to go back to the filter, and this is going to be one of the 2 cells that we're going to use behind the combo box. So we're going to choose H3. And then we're going to have 7 options. So choose 7 there. So what you'll be able to see if I move this out of the way is, whenever I choose something, red's going to be 1, green's going to be 3, all the way down to 7, which is all colors. So what we're going to do with the second cell here is, in order to make the Power Query editing a little simpler, we're going to have this, instead of returning a number, we want it to return the exact drop-down name. So instead of 1, we want it to be red. So to do that, we're going to use index. We're going to enter the input range, which is on this table right here. We're going to select that cell we just selected with the number, and we're going to choose 0. That's going to return whatever we choose. So I'm going to move this back over here to hide those. Well, actually, before we do that, let's before I do that, so we're going to have to change this to a table as well. So I'm going to highlight this and one cell above it. I'm going to come Insert Table. My table has headers. Okay. And I'm going to uncheck the header row. So that's going to be a table. I would recommend you go into the name manager for all these tables and change it to something that makes sense before you move this into Power Query, but for the sake of time, I'm going to skip that. It's not necessary. They do give you standard names. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to take this table here and move this into Power Query. So we're going to click on the cell that we just made a table, come up here to Data, from Table Range. That's going to open up the Power Query editor. Now it's going to throw some code in here already. We're going to go ahead and delete these 2, the second and third lines here. We're going to leave just this, and then we're going to enter a reference to the cell. So we want it to be, the first part of this is we're going to pick a name. That's a variable that describes accurately what it is that the drop-down is. So in our case, it's the division, right? It's the colors. Each division has a color, so we're going to choose division equals, and we're going to do record field. And then we didn't give this a header, so it's going to be the standard header of column 1. Then we're going to change this to division. Okay, you can see I've already done this, so I'm going to go ahead and... Alright, so I've cleared all those out of there. What you're going to see is just this one query over here. So now that we've gotten that set up, let's see, I erased it again, so I'm just going to redo it real quick. Going to hit done. That's going to populate that. Now we're going to come over here and change this to the same name, division. Hit enter. And that's going to do it for that. So what we can do now is we're going to come over here to close and load. Let's see, it's not giving me the option to close and load too. So we're just going to go ahead and close and load, and it's going to probably bring this up into a new sheet. And so all we're going to do is just delete this sheet. And that's moved it to a connection only, which is what we want. The next part is we're going to set up the begin and the end dates, just like we did the drop down there. So I'm going to come over here, and column width, that's a little cramped, so I'm going to change it to 10. And then we're going to highlight the 2 input cells down here, and we're going to highlight the begin date and end date up there. Insert table. My table has headers. Okay. And I'm just going to leave the headers on there. Because those are the headers that we want. At that point, we're going to come, we're going to highlight the table here, data from table / range to move it into Power Query. Come into the advanced editor. So we're going to change this. First thing we're going to do is we want these to be dates. So we're going to change this to date. And then we're going to add some code right below this last one here. So every single line of code in here gets a comma except the last one in the let statement. The little in section here functions as the comma. So this one will always be the very last variable of the last line. So I'm going to put a comma there, and then we're going to come down here. We're going to declare our variable for begin date. So begin date equals, and this would be just like the last one, except that we want to put something in the code that allows it to not mess up when there's no date in the box. So if someone were using it and they cleared out the date by hitting delete, we don't want that to mess up the entire table. So what we're going to do is we're going to do if f.field sorry, the column is begin date. I should have used the same name as in the documentation. In the documentation, it shows begin. So this one, it's begin date. So what we're saying is if this cell right here is not null, which would be blank, then we want it to show whatever is in that field. If it is blank, then we're going to have it return a 1, and that's going to return a date very early on, like 1800s, which doesn't matter. That just guarantees that the beginning date is going to encompass all of the data that we're looking at. So change this to begin date. Then we're going to hit done. One last thing to do here, extracted date equals date.from. So what we're going to do is we're going to come up to all right, well, let's just see. Let's type it in. Extracted. We're going to skip that part for now. Might come back to it later on. Alright, so we're going to also do the same thing with end date. So we're going to right click in the query section here. Well, before I do that, let me change this to begin date. Alright, so we're going to right click over here, new query, other source, blank query. We're going to come up here to the advanced editor for begin date. We're going to copy this entire thing. And we're going to come over here to query 1 and we're going to paste it in. So the difference is here. So this is going to, everything that says begin is going to be end. And then we're going to change this from 1 to a number that will guarantee it covers all dates on the other end. So we're going to do a giant number of 100,000. Click done there. Alright, so the reason it was not doing what I expected it to do is because I had not entered a date into these boxes. So once I enter a date into these boxes, it automatically changes the type that the box is from general to date, and that's going to affect these over here. It's now changed this to a date time. So what we're going to want to do is for the begin date, we're going to come up here to transform, click on date, we're going to choose date only. And the same thing for end date here. And I'm not sure why it's showing begin date for both. Let's see if we change this to end date if that has any problems. Yeah, I'm not sure. In the documentation it shows end date. That worked last time, so I can't tell you why that is, but we shouldn't be entering this. All we have to do is come up here to transform, date, and then date only. So just make sure that you enter a date into these boxes. You would close out of this, enter a date. It'll change the type to date, and then you'll come back in here and you'll have these this transform bar available to you where you'll hit date and then date only. So once we finish that, we can hit close and load 2. If that's not available, we can just click out of it. If this were your first time leaving, it would create it into new tabs down here, and we would just delete those. And we can see the connection only, which is what we want. So now what we have left to do is we have to import the data into Power Query. So we're going to come over here to the Data tab. We're going to highlight the data. We're going to come Data from Table Range. Come up here to the Advanced Editor. We're going to change these from date time to just date. That way they're only dates. And then we're going to add some code. So first part of code that we're going to do is this is going to activate the filter for the dates. So what I'd recommend doing is I'd recommend you just enter it as it shows on the documentation. But if you run into an issue and you're not sure what to do, a great way to troubleshoot is you just come out here and then you click on these drop downs, uncheck all these, and you just check on one random one, and that'll filter that one random one. Then you come back into the advanced editor and it'll give you the code that you need almost entirely. The only thing we have to do is change this little part down here. What this is saying is we want only to show the rows where the sales date equals this date, and it's going to be 9/15/2020. We're going to want it to show when the sales date equals the begin date that we set up. So we can just erase that, type in begin date. And now what we're going to do is we want it to be greater than or equal to begin date. So and then less than or equal to the end date. So we're going to come down here, I'm going to hit enter, and we're going to have sales date, and we're going to change this to greater than or equal to, and then we're going to choose and right there next to it. We're going to come down here, sale date is less than or equal to end date. And we're going to make sure we have enough commas here. So we've got closing off one comma there, but we haven't closed off the other, so we're going to close that one off right there. And then we got this one down here is filtered rows, so that's good to go. So I'm going to click done, and let's see, there we go, looking good. So we'll come back into the advanced editor, and we're going to paste in some code that'll filter it on the combo box now. So what you can do is if you want to organize this, you can say, put some lines here, and if you want to comment, you just hit the one little air apostrophe next to the enter bar, and we're going to say this is the section that filters the filters by dates. Let's see, did I do this wrong? Yeah. I'm sorry, it's not going to be the apostrophe, it's going to be the two little bars next to the shift bar. Go in that direction. We'll do the same down here. This is the section that filters the based on the combo box. So now I'm just going to copy and paste this data from the documentation into here. Now, one important thing to remember is when this comes in, we have to erase the apostrophes, because sometimes it doesn't like the apostrophes that are on it. This looks pretty good. It looks like it's liking the apostrophes here, so I'm going to stick with, I'm not going to erase all those apostrophes. So we've got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we've got 6 colors here. What we're saying is that division thing we set up earlier, that's gonna, if that equals red, so that's the cell that when we click on the drop down and choose a color, that cell also is the same as the drop down. So that's what it's referencing there, that division. If that equals red, then we want it to filter everything by only show us where the division column right here is red, and then so on and so forth. So we get down to the end here. If we were to choose all colors, this says just skip this entire section and end the code right up here at this one up here. So see, this is different. So if we what we want to do is we want to change this up here to filter date, and then I'm going to have this filter division. So this right here is always going to be a reference to the prior step. So filter date, we're good to go there. And the same with this one down here. So now the only thing we need to make sure of is that we put a comma here, because it's no longer the last line, and then that we update the end section. So we want it to be what's to the left of the last one. So this is going to be filter division. We should be good to go. Alright, so you can see the division is green, and so it's filtered everything out except for the ones that are green. So I've hit done. Come over here and name this data table. Okay. We're going to hit close and load 2. And now this little box is going to come up, and what we want is we want to put the table into an existing worksheet. So where do we want to put it? We're going to put it right here on B7. I'm going to hit OK. That's going to populate the table right there. Let's say I changed my mind and I didn't want it right there, I want it somewhere else. So what I could do is come over here to delete the table. And that would change the this to a connection only. So then I come over here, I'd right click, load to, and I could just redo this again, place it wherever I wanted. So let's say I wanted in C7 instead. Just do that again. That'll load it to C7. So at this point we have a working table that is going to be able to be filtered over here, and it's not going to change anything over here. So let's just test this out. We're going to go all colors. I'm going to clear these out. And it's not going to update because I have to refresh the query over here. So I'm going to do that right now. You can see that table is that's the original data that we have. And then if I wanted to see only the green colors, I'd come over here, and for now I'm going to hit the refresh, and it's going to show only the green. And if I wanted to show, let's say, only the ones in December, I'll go 12/1/2020 to 12/31/2020. I had to refresh this again. That would remove this one right here and show me only the ones that are green for the month of December. So the last thing to do now is to code VBA to where when I update, and I see this is just changed over here. So this is something you got to be careful about, because sometimes it'll do that. So we're just going to come up here and drag this back up, and then we'll have to delete this. So the last thing to do is to move this into, is to code VBA to where this will refresh automatically when we make any changes to the date cells, or we change anything on the dropdown. So to do that, we're going to come up here to the Developer tab, I'm going to click on Visual Basics. It's going to open up this thing. Now, on the VBA here, we're going to come up here to Insert, and we're going to choose Module. And you can see I've already have modules here from doing this before, so I'm going to go ahead and delete these just to. Alright, so hide that. So we're going to come up here to Format. Alright, let's see, Visual Basics. Alright, I'm sorry, come to Insert here, and we're going to choose Module, and that's going to create this section here. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to create, we're going to insert the little snippet of code and the documentation. So refresh, and we're going to put some lines in between this here, and then we're going to say active workbook dot connections and this is going to refresh the query every time we run this refresh macro. And so once you've typed that in, we can click out of this. There's no need to save. And what we're going to do next is, I don't know why that's there, but we're going to right click on the combo box. We're going to here to assign macro, and then we're going to choose the one we just created, the refresh. And so from there, if we were to test this, every time we go to choose a new selection, it's going to refresh this data table over here. So pink, you can see it's refreshing. Blue, it's refreshed. And if we wanted to do all colors, we would refresh it again. So that takes care of the combo box. Now for the date box, there's a little more coding involved. We're going to come back into Visual Basics. And this time, instead of doing this in the module, we have to find the sheet that the data cells are on. So they're on the filter sheet. So we're going to come up here and double click on the filter sheet. And so we're going to have two boxes up here, and we're going to choose, come here and choose Worksheet. It's going to create this snippet of code. We don't want this, but we can't delete it quite yet. So we got to keep that there. We're going to come over here to the right box. We're going to choose Change. That's going to create the correct one that we want up here. And now that we've done that, we can delete this old one, Selection Change, that we don't want. So from there, we're going to enter the code in the documentation. If intersect, what we're saying here, I talked about this this code in another video, the bidirectional cells. But what we're saying here is it's going to be C3. We're saying if the target is going to be where our mouse clicks on, the cell that we're clicked on and typing into, and then the range is just, we're saying cell C3 is what we're saying here. So what we're saying is if the cell we're typing in is cell C3, but at the end of this we say is nothing. So what we're saying is a little backwards from what you would normally think. We're saying if these are not, if the cell we're typing in is not C3, then we don't want it to do anything, right? So the then, we're going to put then up there, and we're not going to say anything. And then we're going to come down here and we're going to say else. So if it is cell C3 that's being updated, then we want it to run the refresh macro. And then we're going to come over here and in the if statement, we're going to copy and paste this right below. And all we're going to do is update this cell with the one that is the end date. So that's D3 in this case. So at that point, we've finished that. So we're going to click out of this. Again, no need to save. And what you're going to see is when I go to clear this, it's going to update automatically. And if I want to enter, let's say from 10/1/2020, narrows it down to 10/1/2020. I wanted to do it through 11/30/2020. I'll further narrow it to 11/30/2020. Now all that's being done, and now we're preserving everything that's over here. So once we have all this, we can delete this one right here. This is just what I use to show how when you do this, it damages over there. So we don't need this, so we can delete this. But what we can't delete is the data here, because if we delete this, then it's going to mess up this table. So what we would do is maybe if we wanted to hide it, we could hide it there, and that makes it go away. And then if we wanted to unhide it, we would just right click on the one and then unhide it. And it would prop that up, and we say OK, and then bring it back. So I think that's going to do it for this one. I hope this helps you out, and have a good day.